Hey there, Dr. Avinash here. This is chapter number 15, anti-rheumatoid and anti-gout drug. Let's talk about the anti-rheumatoid drugs first. The drugs we are going to discuss are, except for corticosteroids, drugs that suppress the rheumatoid process, bring about a remission and retard the disease progression, but do not have non-specific anti-inflammatory or analgesic actions. Okay. They are used in rheumatoid arthritis in addition to NSAIDs. So NSAIDs, non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs, are going to be the mainstay. Plus these additional drugs, they are called as DMARDs or disease-modifying anti-rheumatic drugs, or also known as SAARDs, slow-acting anti-rheumatoid drugs. Simple. The basic concept that you have to understand is this: rheumatoid arthritis is an autoimmune disease. In this, there is inflammation of the joints, proliferation of the synovial membrane, and destruction of the articular cartilage. Now, when this autoimmune disease starts, immune complexes are deposited at the level of joint. These immune complexes are made up of IgM. These immune complexes then activate complement and release cytokines, which include TNF-alpha and interleukin-1. TNF-alpha and interleukin-1 are chemotactic for neutrophils. The neutrophils, the inflammatory cells, then secrete enzymes called as lysosomal enzymes, which damage the bone and the cartilage. They erode the bone. Prostaglandins produced in the process of inflammation cause vasodilatation and pain. Simple. So basically, immune complexes of IgM are deposited in the joint. They activate complement, release cytokines. Cytokines are chemotactic for neutrophils. Neutrophils make two things: lysosomal enzymes, which damage the cartilage and erodes the bone, and prostaglandins that enhance vasodilatation and pain. This disease starts off slowly but is chronic, it's progressive, and it is a crippling disorder which has a waxing and waning. Waxing and waning comes and goes. Multiple small joints of the hands and feet are preferentially affected, and as the disease progresses, deformities are produced. Now, because pain is the symptom, non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs are the first-line drugs. Symptomatic relief in pain, swelling, and the classical morning stiffness and immobility of rheumatoid arthritis. But they don't stop the disease process. When we plan the drug therapy for rheumatoid arthritis, we have three main points in mind: stop the pain, swelling, and joint stiffness. Second, prevent damage to the cartilage and bones. So stop the bones from eroding, stop the articular cartilage damage. And third, preserve the joint function, prevent deformity, so the patient has a good quality of life. Now, what you need to understand is this: mild or early cases are non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs alone, but you can even add DMARDs as soon as you confirm the diagnosis. Which are these DMARDs? Well, we can classify them into adjuncts and DMARDs proper. Adjuncts are prednisolone and glucocorticoids. This will be dealt with in a chapter called as corticosteroids from the hormone unit. The non-biological DMARDs and the biological agents both modify the disease progress, slow down the disease progress. The non-biological includes immunosuppressants such as methotrexate, azathioprine, and cyclosporin, and other immunomodulators such as sulfasalazine, hydroxychloroquine or chloroquine, leflunomide, and tofacitinib. We also have biological agents which inhibit the TNF-alpha, etanercept, infliximab, and adalimumab, and others such as anakinra, abatacept, and rituximab. Simple. We are going to talk about the immunosuppressants first. In this, you must know methotrexate properly. Methotrexate inhibits an enzyme. That enzyme is dihydrofolate reductase. So methotrexate is a dihydrofolate reductase inhibitor. Dihydrofolate reductase is the enzyme that converts the inactive form of folic acid, dihydrofolate, into active form of folic acid, tetrahydrofolate. So by blocking the conversion of dihydro to tetrahydrofolic acid, the cell functioning becomes impaired. especially in the WBCs, which gives it an immunosuppressant and anti-inflammatory property. Not only that, methotrexate inhibits cytokine production, inhibits chemotaxis, and inhibits cell-mediated immune reaction. The proliferation of inflammatory cells are inhibited, and as a result the WBC count goes low, the immunity becomes a slightly little lesser than normal, and hence there is benefit in rheumatoid arthritis. You start with low dose, oral dose, 7.5 to 15 mg weekly, and it works beautiful. Okay, symptomatic relief will start within 3 to 6 weeks. So this can be the initial treatment also. So this is now the disease modifying anti-rheumatoid drug of first choice and the standard treatment for most patients, including juvenile rheumatoid arthritis. Now because this is more predictable and sustained response, it's good. And we can combine 2 or 3 DMARDs. When you combine 2 or 3 DMARDs, methotrexate is invariably present in that combination. Oral bioavailability is affected by food probably, okay, and it's not recommended in patients with renal disease because excretion is hindered. Probenecid and aspirin MCQ increase methotrexate level and toxicity, and trimethoprim can be added to inhibit dihydrofolate reductase and depress the bone marrow. Great. WBCs are not going to multiply, immunity will come under control, rheumatoid arthritis is under control now. Problem: when you are blocking the activation of folic acid, you also make epithelial cells suffer because they are also rapidly multiplying, and hence major side effects will be oral ulceration and GI upset. Okay, even with low dose of methotrexate, this is going to be a very important side effect. Too long therapy will lead to progressive liver damage. Even cirrhosis can happen. This is not seen with short courses. Methotrexate can be used for cancer treatments also. So for that, we give shorter periods of methotrexate. There no problem like that. Immunity decreases, so chest infection rate increases, and you don't give it in pregnancy, breastfeeding, liver disease, active infections, leukopenia, or peptic ulcers. So simple. Now another non-biological agent which can be asked in your exam is a purine synthase inhibitor, azathioprine. Azathioprine comes inside the body, goes to the liver, gets converted into 6-mercaptopurine by an enzyme called as TPMT, thiopurine methyl transferase. Now 6-mercaptopurine acts like the purine synthase inhibitor. So if purines are not made, the cells can't multiply. This is a potent suppressant of cell-mediated immunity, and it appears to selectively affect the functioning and differentiation of T cells and natural killer cells. As a result, it will also suppress inflammation. The problem is smaller percentage of rheumatoid arthritis patients are undergoing remission because of this. So it's not really the preferred one. We can give it along with corticosteroid. So the dose of corticosteroid can be decreased. Okay, this is because corticosteroids have too many long-term side effects. So if you have not yet done corticosteroid from the hormonal part, please have a look at it. It will really help. As far as sulfasalazine is concerned, this particular drug has been described in drug for inflammatory bowel disease under the GIT section, and you don't have to do it from here. Hydroxychloroquine, we have done it at malaria, at the level of malaria. How it works we don't know, but it reduces monocyte interleukin 1 and inhibits B lymphocyte, and even antigen processing is interfered with. Some doctors or some scientists believe that lysosomal stabilization and free radical scavenging, like free radicals are gone, lysosomal enzymes are not released, and that's how this works probably. Okay, the problem is we have to give chloroquine or hydroxychloroquine for a long period of time. This gives the chance for chloroquine to accumulate in tissue, especially melanin containing tissue, and this produces toxicity. The worst would be the retinal damage and corneal opacities. Okay, this is less common with hydroxychloroquine. So of course hydroxychloroquine would be preferred over chloroquine. Apart from that, rashes, graying of hair, irritable bowel syndrome, myopathy, neuropathy are known to happen. Okay, we don't really require those because we have better agents nowadays. Okay, leflunomide, if you wish to do, just have a look at it. This is going to be purely university oriented session, and hence I don't want to waste your time doing drugs that may not even come in your exam. Which brings me to biological agents, the TNF alpha inhibitors and others. Here, let's talk about TNF alpha inhibitors first. The cytokine probably plays a very important role in inflammatory cascade of rheumatoid arthritis. It activates membrane bound receptors on the surface of T cells and macrophages. So the TNF alpha is stimulating the T cells and macrophage, which these cells are then kind of damaging um, the joints basically in rheumatoid arthritis. If you give soluble TNF alpha receptor protein or antibody, then the TNF alpha produced inside the joints, inside the body of the patient, instead of binding to the membrane bound receptor, will bind to the medicine that we are giving, the TNF receptor protein or antibody, and as a result it gets neutralized, the reaction stops. Simple. So we are trying to create a decoy. Decoy is a diversion. Instead of going to these receptors, the TNF alpha now will go to the TNF soluble TNF receptor proteins or antibodies that we have given, and as a result the macrophage and T cell function gets suppressed, inflammation in the joints slowly regress, new erosions are slowed down, and this is faster, quicker response than non-biological ones. Okay, even though it's effective even as a single drug therapy, we generally give it along with methotrexate. Especially if methotrexate is not working very nicely, then we add this. Okay, the problem is we are reducing the activity of one of the most important cytokines in our body, TNF alpha. So susceptibility to opportunistic infections including TB, pneumocystis, pneumonia, they are increased. Okay, so all these granulomatous inflammations will increase. You need to know a little bit about etanercept. It's a recombinant fusion protein of the TNF receptor with Fc portion of human immunoglobulin 1. What I'm trying to say is, if I have to draw this particular drug, it will look like this. The upper part of this drug would be of the TNF alpha receptor. The lower part of this medicine is the Fc portion of IgG1. Now given by injection 50 mg weekly, it will bind to and prevent TNF alpha from activating the receptors on the surface of macrophages and T cells, right? The only problem is pain, redness and itching and swelling at the injection site, and even chest infections can increase. But immunogenic, this is not immunogenic. We will not make antibodies against this particular drug. Okay, other drugs are not important. I don't think you should waste time behind it. And if you have done corticosteroids from the hormonal unit of pharmacology, you will be able to understand this. Just go through this after you have done pharmac of corticosteroids. Just go through this once and you should be fine. This is the first part of our topic. The second part, of course, is anti-gout medication. Now, what is gout and why are we worried about gout? Gout is a metabolic disorder. It's characterized by hyperuricemia, that's uric acid level is higher than normal. Where is uric acid in the body coming from? It's coming as it's a product of purine metabolism. Uric acid does not easily dissolve in water, especially at low pH. At acidic pH, it does not dissolve in water at all. Now, when blood urate levels are high, it can easily precipitate in the joints, in the kidneys, in the subcutaneous tissue. And in the subcutaneous tissue, it is called as tophi. The drugs for gout can be divided into two main categories, acute or chronic. gout, depending on acute gout or chronic gout. For acute, you give painkillers such as non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs. You can even give colchicine and glucocorticoids. Whereas for chronic gout, you either cause excretion of uric acid or you stop the synthesis of uric acid. Probenecid and allopurinol is what we are supposed to be interested in. Now, in your body, in my body, in everybody's body, DNA is broken down when the cells die. Purines are released from that broken DNA and it is converted into uric acid. Now, in our body, the uric acid concentration is so low that it is easily excreted. Sometimes in some people, the uric acid production is higher than normal. That's hyperuricemia, and if it gets precipitated, it's gout. Sometimes there is a reason for that high uric acid. Maybe it is because of leukemias, lymphoma, polycythemia, where there's too much of these cells, and you give chemotherapy or radiotherapy and all these cells die. And as a result, then nucleic acid has to undergo metabolism, and what happens? Too much of uric acid. Or it can be drug induced. Thiazides, furosemide, pyrazinamide, ethambutol, levodopa, they all reduce uric acid excretion by the kidney. Let's talk about acute gouty arthritis. This manifests as a sudden onset of severe inflammation of small joint. Especially commonest joint would be metatarsophalangeal joint of the great toe. Uric acid crystal or urate crystals have been deposited here. The joint becomes red, swollen and extremely painful, and it requires immediate treatment with a strong anti-inflammatory drug. Don't try to lower blood urate level at this point of time, just stop the pain. Once the attack goes away, then you can think about decreasing the uric acid level. An anti-inflammatory cover for 2-3 weeks that we can try. If not controlled, hyperuricemia will again involve the same joint and many more joints. Then there will be chronic deforming arthritis. The number one drug, of course, is non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs. Categories the drugs are basically naproxen, piroxicam, diclofenac, indomethacin or etoricoxib. Given in relatively high doses and in quick succession, they terminate the attack, but sometimes even they take almost 12 to 24 hours to start their proper action, and complete resolution might take 5 to 10 days. Now, there was a better drug than this, colchicine. But colchicine had some toxicities. NSAIDs have very little toxicity, so patients prefer NSAIDs over the other ones. If you have done the chapter on non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs and you have time, have a look at naproxen and piroxicam. Just additional ones. I don't think it will ever come in your exam, but just do this. After the attack gets over, continue for at least 3-4 weeks to control, while the other drugs control hyperuricemia. Colchicine was an alkaloid from a plant called as Colchicum autumnale. Okay, this has been used for gout for quite some time. We just separated the medicine from the plant extract 1980, that's 1820s. This is not analgesic nor anti-inflammatory, but it suppresses gouty inflammation. Now, how does that do? How does that happen? Well, it does not do anything to uric acid also. How does it work? See, when gout starts, uric acid crystals are deposited in the synovial fluid. The synovial cells then eat these uric acid crystals and they release mediators and start an inflammatory response. During this process, chemotactic factors are produced which call in granulocytes to migrate into the joints. They also try to phagocytose these urate crystals. Unfortunately, the urate crystals are needle shaped and they cannot be destroyed by the enzymes present in the neutrophils. During this process of phagocytosis, they release a glycoprotein which increases inflammation even more. Like lactic acid production from the inflammatory cell increases, local pH reduces, more crystals will get formed. And lysosomal enzymes which are released will destroy the joint even more. Now, colchicine does one thing only: inhibit release of chemotactic factor and of that glycoprotein. If there is no glycoprotein, then these steps don't happen. If there is no chemotaxis, WBCs don't come in, and as a result, the entire event is suppressed. Simple. How does this work? Probably it works by binding to a protein called as tubulin. By binding to this tubulin, it inhibits granulocyte from coming into the joint. Migration is stopped. So the vicious cycle where granulocyte come in, they phagocytose, release a glycoprotein, more inflammation, more neutrophils come in. That vicious cycle is stopped. We also think it is anti-mitotic. It causes metaphase arrest by binding to microtubules, so WBCs might not be able to multiply properly, and it increases gut motility by neural mechanism, which has got nothing to do with the gout that we are talking about. The problem with colchicine was toxicity. Started off simple, nausea, vomiting, watery or bloody diarrhea, soon progressed to abdominal cramps. Also, the drug accumulates in the intestine and it inhibits mitosis in its mitosis of the intestinal cells. Remember, intestinal cells have to multiply. They are epithelium. When you inhibit those mucosal cells from multiplying, toxicity happens. In overdose, it can even cause kidney damage, CNS depression, intestinal bleeding, and death can happen because of muscular paralysis and respiratory failure, and hence people don't like this drug. Simple, cool. So where will we use colchicine? This is the fastest acting drug to control acute attack of gout. A 0.5 mg 1 to 3 hourly, total of 4 doses in a day, maximum 6 mg in a course over 3 to 4 days. More than sufficient. Actually, the control of an attack is achieved within 6 to 12 hours. Complete resolution takes 3 to 5 days, but it's still better than the non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs. And once you do that, give a gap of at least 3 to 7 days before you offer a second course if necessary. Actually, giving colchicine creates such a dramatic response in the patient that it is considered as diagnostic of gout. No other disease is responding to colchicine so nicely. But because of its toxicity, is a second line option. Okay, we can even give it a maintenance dose in which time you control hyperuricemia. Simple. Steroids are really not the question from this chapter. There's a different chapter for that. But have a look at steroids once you go through the steroid part in hormonal. Have a look at this part also. Let's talk about chronic gout or hyperuricemia. How do you treat chronic gout? When pain and stiffness persist in a joint even between attacks, that's when we say gout has become chronic. Apart from that, most of these people will have hyperuricemia and chalk-like stones under the skin in pinna, eyelids, nose, around joints and many other places. These are called as tophi, and urate stones in the kidney. Then the patient probably has hyperuricemia and chronic gout. Okay. In most patients, hyperuricemia is because uric acid has not been thrown out, under secretion of uric acid. In few, it is because of overproduction. So let's try and make a medicine that throws uric acid out of the body. It's probenecid. This is a highly lipid soluble organic acid, developed somewhere around 1951. The reason why we made this was never to treat gout. It was actually made to prolong the activity of penicillin. You know what happens when you give probenecid? Probenecid competitively blocks the active transport of organic acid. The transport pump is called as organic acid transport protein at all sites, including the renal tubule. So the transport process at OATP is blocked competitively. Simple. Now this is not like the general block that we have in our mind. This is this transport is kind of bidirectional. So this is what happens. Like, I'll give you an example, then I'll explain to you what this statement here means. Penicillin is secreted by the proximal tubule. Its reabsorption is minimal. So when you give probenecid, there is inhibition of penicillin excretion and more will be sustained in the blood. Clear? But uric acid is largely reabsorbed by the transport proteins. Less is excreted and only a little part is gone out. Okay, most of it is reabsorbed. Okay, so only 1/10 is excreted in urine, the rest of the thing is reabsorbed. Probenecid in this case will inhibit reabsorption and promote excretion. So penicillin which was excreted will not be excreted, and uric acid which was not excreted will get excreted. Now this is written in Pharmac English, like the net effect of probenecid on excretion depends on whether secretion or reabsorption of the particular organic acid is quantitatively more important. This line actually makes us understand this part. Simple. I hope you have got it. If not, just drop in a comment or WhatsApp me. I will be more than happy to help you out. Apart from that, probenecid does nothing. It is not an analgesic, it's not an anti-inflammatory, it just throws uric acid out. Simple. There are some adverse effects, mostly well tolerated, but most common side effect is dyspepsia. And use it with caution in patients with peptic ulcers. Other times rashes and hypersensitivity phenomena can happen, but they are very rare. Its use is chronic gout and hyperuricemia. Second line or an adjuvant drug to allopurinol, which we will be studying in some time from now. Start at 0.25 mg BD, increase to 0.5 gram BD. Slowly and gradually the urate pool in the body decreases, blood urate levels fall, everything is thrown out. The blood uric acid level becomes normal faster. Arthritis, TOE5, other lesions will take months to resolve. So don't start only probenecid. Colchicine or NSAID is to be given for the 1 to 2 months. Otherwise, acute gout might be precipitated. So this has to be done. Plus, you have to start probenecid. Okay. Now, if the kidney is not working properly, then probenecid will become ineffective. So you should first check the creatinine clearance. If the creatinine clearance is more than 50 ml per minute or serum creatinine is less than 2 mg per deciliter, it proves that the kidneys are working properly. Patients with kidney stones, don't give probenecid. And tell the patient to take plenty of water, otherwise this uric acid which is being thrown out in the kidney might undergo crystallization and there will be uric acid stones. Simple. It can also be given along with penicillin or ampicillin so that penicillin or ampicillin is reabsorbed and it enhances the actions of penicillin in that way. So in gonorrhea and subacute bacterial endocarditis, we can give this. Okay. Now, there is one drug that is very important in this chapter, and that is allopurinol. This is like hypoxanthine. We call it hypoxanthine analog. A purine anti-metabolite which was used for cancer chemotherapy. It was being developed for that. We found out that it does not have any anti-cancer activity. But it was a substrate for an enzyme called as xanthine oxidase. It was the inhibitor of the same substrate, so, a same enzyme. So xanthine oxidase can break as well as get inhibited by allopurinol. Xanthine oxidase is the enzyme responsible for formation of uric acid. So this is how things work. Allopurinol itself has a short acting inhibitor of xanthine oxidase. But remember we said it is also a substrate. So when xanthine oxidase acts on allopurinol, you get alloxanthine, the major metabolite. This is a much more longer acting, much more non-competitive inhibitor of xanthine oxidase. So allopurinol blocks xanthine oxidase, but its metabolite alloxanthine blocks xanthine oxidase even better. Now alloxanthine is primarily responsible for uric acid synthesis inhibition in vivo. More important than allopurinol, it's the alloxanthine, its metabolite, which is more powerful blocker of that reaction. So what you do, you start allopurinol, plasma concentration of uric acid will start reducing, and the concentration of hypoxanthine and xanthine will start increasing. So now instead of just uric acid, hypoxanthine and xanthine all are excreted. They are known as oxypurines. All three are excreted. Now compared to uric acid, which is now less and too much of hypoxanthine and xanthine, hypoxanthine and xanthine are more soluble. They are easily cleared While uric acid finds it difficult to get eliminated, these two are cleared very easily, and as a result, the chances of precipitation, crystallization in tissue and urine does not occur. They are very soluble. Because xanthine and hypoxanthine levels in the blood increase, levels in the body increase, there is feedback inhibition to de novo purine synthesis. So new purines are not formed. The old ones, when they are broken down, instead of forming uric acid, they are forming xanthine and hypoxanthine and are getting thrown out. How can hyperuricemia happen? Not possible. Getting it? And that's how allopurinol inhibits uric acid synthesis. Simple, very easy. So this is just a diagrammatic representation of what I spoke. Hypoxanthine becomes xanthine, becomes uric acid. The enzyme at these reaction is xanthine oxidase. Allopurinol can block xanthine oxidase. Sometimes xanthine oxidase breaks allopurinol into alloxanthine. This is an even better inhibitor of xanthine oxidase. So if these reactions 1 and 2 are blocked on the upper level, uric acid will be very little formed, but most of the compounds will be hypoxanthine and xanthine, and that is exactly what we said. Adverse effects are uncommon. Some people get hypersensitivity reactions like rash, fever, malaise, muscle pain, and this goes away on stopping the drug. Allopurinol should not be restarted because serious reactions happen. So once side effects start, don't give it again. Renal impairment increases the incidence of rashes. So be sure that the kidneys are working properly, and a rare side effect is peeling of the skin. It's called a Steven-Johnson syndrome. Rare but very important side effect. Apart from this, some gastric irritation, headache, nausea, dizziness, they are infrequent. You don't have to stop that. Continue. Allopurinol is the first choice drug for chronic gout. It can be used in both overproducers and under-excretors. Even cases with tophi and nephropathy respond very nicely. Now, we don't use this uricosurics too much in India, at least, because they are less effective when GFR is low and in stone formers, and we don't have that much testing ability. We don't, like, Indians don't like testing themselves for GFR and other such things, so we don't use them that much. Even synthesis inhibitors and uricosurics can be combined together. This is a long-term therapy, almost like lifelong. During prolonged therapy, tophi gradually disappear. If kidneys were damaged, the damage stops. Sometimes it gets reversed. So this is my primary use. I can even use allopurinol in secondary hyperuricemia when cancer chemotherapy, radiation and thiazides or other drugs are given, where we know that uric acid levels are going to increase. Give this, so uric acid is not formed, xanthine, hypoxanthine is formed, and it is excreted. It can even be used to potentiate 6-mercaptopurine or azathioprine in cancer chemotherapy and immunosuppressant. The other drugs are not important. I hope you do all these questions properly. Let me know if there's any doubt. I will be more than happy to help you. I'll see you in yet another video. Till the next time we meet, this is Dr. Avinash signing off for now. Take care, keep studying and keep rocking. Bye bye.